Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Aimee Schreiber.
And I'm Hilary Zwallen. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries. Hello, fellow Intentionists, and welcome to episode 64, where we're going to be talking about balancing burdens, the 10 of Wands and Libra. And if you have been following us for a while, we have been doing this series. We pulled a tarot card for every month to give us a creative guide on what to discuss. And we've only been recording one episode a month lately because Aimee and I have been buried in other creative projects. So we have an interesting lineup coming in the new year of topics and all of that. So we will be back to our regular 2 to 3 times a month releasing podcasts here soon. But so thank you for sticking with us, bearing with us. So Aimee, I just wanted to catch up really quick. Like it feels like forever.
I know, it's been a long time. I'm excited to be back on here. Yeah, it's been weird because before, when I'm listening to a book or I'm reading something, it's always like, oh, this is perfect. We can talk about this in our next episode. But I feel like we have a month worth of,
I know,
of things to do. So yeah, I'm excited about the episodes that we have planned coming up.
Yes.
Do you want to give the little update on your project?
Oh yeah. So I have finished the second draft of the novel that I'm working on. And I've sent it to the editor, who is Lisa Lister. She's been amazing and super supportive. And so it's been really fun to work with her. And it's been like the hardest freaking thing. I feel like doing the second draft, I was like, okay, now I'm a writer. Like I remember talking to my cousin about this. My cousin is a runner, and she wasn't a runner growing up, but she started marathoning when she was in her 20s. And I remember having a conversation with her, and she was saying at one point, she was like, I'm a runner. Like it was like after she had done like 4 marathons, it like occurred to her. She's like, I'm a runner. Like I'm actually running. And I'm feeling like that now as a writer. I'm like, okay, I think I can say that I'm a writer. Like I have 285 pages sitting here on my desk. And now I'm working on the proposal, which I thought like in my mind, I thought was going to be like 2 or 3 pages, like just quick little thing to send off to whoever. And turns out it is quite the extensive master's thesis of a like press kit promotional things. So that's going to take me a while. I think the biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is just that, and I mean, I learned this through business too, but just that everything takes a lot longer than you think it's going to take, right? When you get into it, you're like, oh my gosh. So anyway, it's been a really cool experience. I feel like I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about how I work creatively and dealing with resistance. And I think the biggest challenge is honestly like just wrestling the demons in your brain, you know, because I get through something and I'm like, okay, this is great. And then I'm like, no, this is garbage. What if nothing happens with this? What if this is nothing? And I'm like talking about it on a podcast. And what if I, just all those like self-doubt things. Like everybody I know knows that I'm writing a book. And if it doesn't get picked up, I just decided, I'm like, this will be a good exercise for me in just not giving an F, right? Because if it doesn't get picked up, then everyone's going to know that it wasn't picked up and nobody wants to publish it. And I guess that's okay, right?
It is okay. And you can just publish it yourself. Like we're in a day and age where it's pretty amazing that you can like express yourself in whatever way you can imagine, basically. And be able to find some sort of audience for it. It may not be the most giant global audience, but like it's pretty amazing how technology has evolved.
Yes.
This thing.
Yes. In fact, last night I went to go see Jen Hatmaker. Do you know who Jen Hatmaker is? So I didn't know who she was. I'd heard of her name before. I think she's a pretty successful podcaster and writer, but highly like in the Christian communities. I think she was a Southern Baptist, and I don't know that she is a Southern Baptist any longer. I think because her whole conversation last night was about faith crisis and like her faith crisis. And it was really interesting to hear her take on that and sit in a room full of people where I think, we've obviously talked extensively about our own faith crises, I guess, and to kind of hear her talk about it. And the reason I was even bringing this up was at the end, she did this Q&A thing, and a woman had raised her hand and said, I got really inspired by you writing a book. And so I wrote a book and I wanted to give it to you. And she brought her book up that she had published. I think she
Oh,
probably
cool.
self-published it, but it was so cool. I just thought I was like really inspired by, I just thought there's so many women doing so many amazing things and being so brave and so, and just like the work and the labor it takes to produce something like this. When you don't, you're really
Right.
going on a hope and a prayer. You know, I think I've done business before. I've done creative stuff before, and business stuff is very transactional. You know, you create a product, you sell a product, you get paid. It's
Mhm.
immediate validation, or it doesn't sell and you know you did something wrong. But the creative process, I mean, you could be in it for a year, and you know, odds are at some point you're going to do something creative and nothing's going to come of it, right? I mean, I've definitely done that before. I've had that be the
Mhm.
case for me in lots of different avenues. And sometimes it really works out well and sometimes it doesn't. So it really is an interesting, you know, odyssey of having faith in yourself, I've discovered. And just going, you know, I'm trusting the process and I'm trusting that I'm learning more than just results and hoping that results will
Right.
be good. But anyway, so
Right. Well, and even more than like the actual writing and creating,
mhm.
you are having the chance right now, especially with the proposal stuff, to kind of define and redefine yourself in a new way, which is always a crazy like exercise to do.
Yeah, that's, you know, I was having
So,
that thought yesterday as I was going through. It's always the worst to write a bio. Who likes to write a
mhm.
bio, right? Doesn't
Right.
everybody hate writing a bio? And it feels like like everyone has to have a bio, right? You have like a bio on Instagram and a bio for whatever. And I have
Uh-huh.
like 5 different ones depending on what I'm doing because I do sound healings and then I do, you know, business coaching and you know, it just like depends on who I'm
Mhm.
talking to. Like, am I going to be the woo lady today or am I going to be like the business lady today? I don't know. And sometimes I'm both of those ladies. But anyway, it was interesting to go through and not only think about, you know, how am I going to define myself, but also like, who is this really for? Who is the audience? Because I mean, I've been thinking about
Right.
the audience, but it's a delicate balance of trying to go, you know, who is going to be interested in this? And then also just being true to the art that's coming through, you know, true to the story that's
Mhm.
coming, that you're bringing into the world. So anyway, it's definitely been an interesting process of refinement. I think I've just learned a ton through the whole thing. So hopefully it's the beginning of a long journey of writing and that I get to do this again and again and again, but we'll see. So
Yes. No, I'm
Amy,
very excited.
thank you. And you've been so supportive. So I appreciate it. Now tell me what you've been up to.
I've been writing a bunch of poetry and I've been doing this illustration series of like illustrating a poem a day for 40 days. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it hasn't been right in a row, but I'm like just reached over halfway on that. And it's been really exciting to do because it's just shown me like how much can be accomplished and how much progress can be made if you just give yourself a little assignment and a little deadline for it.
Mm.
And so it makes me feel like, oh, what can I do next? Like, what is my next little like month-long challenge going to be? And I can already see like an improvement in my drawing skills just from 3 weeks ago. So that's pretty exciting.
I know we've talked a lot about the container before,
Mm-hmm.
and I love when you brought that up. I feel like the lessons I've been learning lately are lessons I've learned before a lot. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, on the one hand, it's kind of frustrating because you're like, what? I know this. I've learned this lesson a million times and now it's coming back again. But I got some good advice from a friend the other day who was just like reminding me, you know, basic tenets of truth, you know? And then when you say this, like, it's like, yeah, just creating a hard deadline and really sticking to it. I mean, you get stuff done when you have a deadline. So I love that you
All
brought that
right.
up. And then you create a container of like, I'm going to do this for 40 days, whether it's you're doing like a yoga practice or you're writing or you're painting. It's so
Yeah, for
helpful.
anything. It's like the time, and it seems really overwhelming in the beginning, but the time passes anyway. It's like a month is going to pass in a month anyway. And you can either like show up every day, even when it seems a little bit daunting, or you can not. Like yeah, it is all like mental nonsense that
But
you have
you
to
bring up a
sift through
point though
too.
that the way you set yourself up for success is by
Uh-huh.
creating these containers, right? Because it's one thing
Yes,
to just be like, I'm going to be creative today. And like, if you're totally unstructured, like good luck, right? Good luck getting
mhm.
things done.
Right,
Right?
right.
Good luck to you. You might be brilliant and you might be able to do it. But I know I spend a lot of time wandering aimlessly in my house when I'm like, should I be like, especially when I'm up against a deadline where I'm like, okay, I need to sit down and write, but I also need to do laundry and I need to make dinner for my family. And how am I going to make this work? And eventually, like, I think it's been great working with Lisa because it was finally like, okay, I've got to get this in on Friday because she's got a bunch of things she's got to do and I need to get things going. And I just sat down and like freaking sat there for 16 hours and finished the freaking draft. And I was like, okay, like, I can't believe I did that much work in one day, but I did it. So sometimes, you know, you can't do that every day. And it took me a day or two to recover from that. But there's something about creating that container. I love that you brought that up.
That's very true. And yeah, I think this has to do with our topic today. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but I say we dive into the symbols and then continue on with this, because I feel like this is basically what we always talk about every single episode in one way or another, our little creative containers. But so with this 10 of Wands card is actually, it's kind of about leadership and the burden of leadership. And it's kind of with great power comes great responsibility, like Spider-Man card. And the message is that hard work and all the things you do to set yourself up, it doesn't necessarily bring more happiness. It often just brings more hard work. And this is kind of the downside of leadership. And the more you become expert at something, the more you do, the more responsibility you have, and then the more time and energy it takes to fulfill those responsibilities. So the question always to ask ourselves in these situations when we find ourselves in positions of more responsibility is really, are you going to carry on with this? Are you staying in balance with all of this? Or is it time to turn the reins over to someone else? And when do you walk away from a project? When do you walk away from this thing? And the answer usually is if it's destroying your life, or if you become just a total slave to the project.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, this is something that Emily McDowell talked about in the episode we did with her a couple months ago. We were talking about like the hustle versus wholeness. And she was just basically talking about all these things that we work for and the ways we define ourselves that we think are going to give us more happiness and health and meaning and all of these things. They end up like in the process robbing us of those things, you know, and learning what our true values are and where our true worth lies. That's always going to be a process, and that just kind of emerges along the way. But there are these crossroads that we come to where we realize sometimes that, oh, all this hard work I've been doing, like, it's not having the intended outcome that I thought it was going to have. And so at this point, is the burden too heavy for me to carry right now? And what do I do with it? And you have some really particular experience with this concept with your experience with White Plum.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting because as you were like, I didn't look over your notes before we started this. So I'm like going through this going, oh my gosh, this is literally the theme of my life the last 3 weeks. And I mean, there's an element of that with White Plum in the reasons why I felt like I wanted to sell the business when we sold it, because I just felt so, you know, overwhelmed and kind of trapped in a way. And I didn't really know how to get myself out of the responsibility of being a leader. But the other thing that's come up is I'm a part of this leadership network in town. And we had a retreat recently, and I'll just keep it really vague because there's a confidentiality portion of this. But the thing that was so overwhelming to me, and you're in this group of just like extraordinary leaders, like these people that are in this network are people that I just respect wholeheartedly. And they all come, it was intentionally designed to be extremely diverse. So it's lots of different people from different races, ethnicities, socioeconomic fields of leadership are different. You know, some are from the business sector, some are NGOs, some are health and human services, and, you know, kind of just runs the gamut, teachers. And so it's a really diverse and interesting group of people. And the thing that I was so in the forefront was just how exhausted everyone is. Like, and these are like the cream of the crop, right? Like the most amazing people I know. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm alone in my house, like kind of isolated, writing a book and doing my thing. And I'm feeling overwhelmed, and as a mother and just all the things. And like, so is literally everyone else. Everyone is like to the end of their rope. And I think, you know, part of it is like, you know, I'm in the middle of my life now, right? I'm smack dab in the middle of my life, and there's just so much to juggle. But this idea of having more responsibilities, of wanting to serve, and like just how challenging it can be, and really with what's going on collectively right now and the conversations that are being had. And the thing that was striking me when you were talking about this was this idea that I think where we're moving collectively, this is like I'm putting on my little shaman hat for a second, but where we're moving collectively is we're really, and the people that I see really, there's a lot of people really attempting to do this. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to be able to have differences and still be in relationships with people and still be in dialogue with people, because this whole like facade of the news media and how divided everyone is. I mean,
Yeah.
there's truth to that. There are people honoring that narrative, but there are
Mhm.
so many people that are really digging deep and trying to figure out, how do we have our differences and be connected still and be unified?
Right.
How do we because we can be so segregated in our online world. We can curate things. The algorithm curates things, whether we're on social media,
Mhm.
we see more of what we want to see. So we
Right.
really put ourselves in these echo chambers. Anyway, I feel like I'm going on and on about this, but so I will wrap it up here. But my point is that I'm really present to this idea right now that the current leadership, people who are attempting to step into these circles where there's really deep social change happening. And because you're from where
Mhm.
I live, that there's a lot of those themes going on. But this is where we live is a microcosm for what's really going on nationwide and even in the world. It can go as big as the world. I think we're really having a moment as humans where we're like, are we really doing this? Are we going to destroy our planet? Are we going to, are we going to continue to allow ourselves to buy into this idea that we're separate, or are we not? And what I keep seeing, especially with the younger generation and the dialogues that I
Mhm.
have when I'm in women's circles and I'm in, sound healings and I'm talking to other people, is that the answer is no, that people are like, we want to find ways to build bridges and to be connected. So I have a lot of hope, but this idea of leadership and the burden of leadership, because we're redefining it. I think we're redefining it in this moment as a people, as a human,
Right. Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of really important things, and especially the whole isolation factor. I think that that is especially part of what we feel so burdened by, especially people in leadership positions. I mean, especially just everyone, because
Everyone
the nature of the world is we're not
isolated.
living in tight knit little tribes. We are isolated, and
we're constantly on. We're plugged in, right?
yes,
We're scroll. So the brain is not shutting down the way that it has
yes,
in the
and then
past.
when the messaging is divisive and everyone is so different from me, and you kind of get the whole teenage angsty feeling of no one feels how I feel type thing. I
Mhm.
think that's a really easy pit for people of any age to fall into. And I was at the grocery store a week ago having this weird moment of where this old man. I actually wrote a poem about it, but this old man opened the door for me because I was carrying all these groceries.
Mhm.
He could barely walk. He was just shuffling to the door and held the door open for me. And I'm almost dropping all my things. And I'm sheepishly thanking him and smiling at him. But then I looked around after that, and just that one tiny point of connection made me look at everyone else in the parking lot on my walk to the car oh, these people are just like me. Everyone else is just balancing all this stuff.
Mhm.
And we're just the same. There's nothing threatening about them. There's nothing threatening about me.
Yes.
It was this weird. I mean, it sounds weird to say out loud because of course we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together, but it doesn't feel that way inside your mind all the time. And so, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the whole connection versus isolation. And I think that's a part of the burden. And the other part of overburdening ourselves is that, I mean, just all the things and all the distractions that we do create all this needless complexity.
Mm.
So we have to just edit at the point where we're is this additional energy expense, money expense, time expense worth it?
Right.
What am I trying to do by doing this? And
Mhm.
so, I mean, we talk about creating containers, and you have a lot of ideas, I have a lot of ideas. As artists and people who like to create things, it becomes so important to refine and edit
Mm-hmm.
everything in your life. Like, just like when you're writing, you have to edit until you have removed the distractions and you're left with the truest essence of what you're trying to communicate.
Right.
And this goes for like your wardrobe, your physical space, your schedule. So I think just like the big exercise that needs to happen, at least with me, like on a continuous basis, like you can't just do this once,
No.
is you just need to think about like what are we addicted to and attracted to, including in our lives and in our spaces, that in theory seems really great, but in practice is just a burden, it's just a weight. So
Amen to that. Yeah, I love that, Amy. I totally feel the same. And I do feel like just in general, we're seeing that. I think it's because there's not enough mental space. Like it's like, society's changing, economies are changing. There's, we're
mhm.
combating fear about the state of the globe, the global economy, the global environment. Anyway, it's just interesting because I think we're learning to really balance that idea of like, how do we simplify, and then the fallacy that like when you get something done that there's going to be like so much joy, because there is on the one hand,
Right.
right? Like on the one hand, it's like very wonderful. Like I was thinking, I'm always the happiest when I'm really productive. And I've been thinking about that.
Mhm.
Like, why is it that like, if I wake up and I'm like, I made dinner and I did meal planning and I wrote in my book and I exercised, and it's like, I'm killing life. And then the next day I don't have that same focus. And I'm like, I feel like everything's falling apart and I'm like failing at everything. Then I feel so much worse. And it's like, why am I putting so much meaning on the accomplishments? And I mean, yeah, we should try. I mean, I think there's real value in work, and it is great to have
Yeah.
those accomplishments. But I can tell you, like, when we started having success with our business a few years ago, it was thrilling. And then after a while, it was like, oh, I thought it would feel a little bit differently. It
Uh-huh.
wasn't like it solved all the problems, So it's like, it's finding
Right.
that balance, which I think leads us right into Libra, because I think the way we're always, our bodies, our souls, our energetic bodies are always trying to find balance and alignment. And so, nature is always doing it. There's always a remedy in nature, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that like to what you talked about, like not having enough mental capacity, I think it is that, but I think it's also living too much in our heads. So
Mm.
the last little thing I wanted to say about just kind of like the burdens that are hard about life
Mhm.
right now is uncertainty is a big one that we like everyone feels uncertain about the future, and that's just a fact that we have to live with. And but something I've been thinking about is like trying to locate where the anxiety of uncertainty lives in my body.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, is it the tension in my shoulders? Is it in my hips? Is
Mhm.
it in my digestive system? And I think that like, yeah, if we can kind of localize where we feel the stress and like listen to what our body has to say about it, like the body doesn't lie. Like we can overanalyze and tell ourselves all sorts of crazy things in our minds, but the body's pretty
Mhm.
straightforward. It's like, yeah, your body's telling you need to like back off and relax. And that's where like if you have a day that you're not productive, that just may be exactly what your body is ordering you to do,
Yeah, that's sort of
to
breaking
bring
down this whole
balance.
patriarchal idea that
Right.
like we could just wake up and like move in a straight phallic line. Right? Like
Exactly.
that there isn't other
Yes.
things going on. Especially as a woman, I think it's given me a lot of peace to really study my menstrual cycle in conjunction with the moon cycle, in conjunction with the seasons, in conjunction with,
Mhm.
and recognizing that there are days that I'm going to have to be a sloth.
Yeah, it's all about the
Yes.
balance. Like, I mean, like wands are the fire element, the creation and like the forward motion
Hmm.
type thing. But when it goes bad is like when you make yourself ill because you're a
Hmm.
workaholic. That's what we watch out for. So tell us more about the whole balance of Libra. I've been excited to hear about this one because I don't know much about it.
So Libra is the sign of the diplomat, and it's ruled by the planet Venus. And Venus is actually co-ruled. We talked about Venus a little bit when we went over Taurus, but it's co-ruled by Venus
Mhm.
and Libra. and it's an air sign. And it's basically interpersonal, initiating social and intellectual action. So it's, I need to cooperate with others and to create balance and harmony in my life. Or it's exploring, this is the vibration this month of our need to cooperate with others to create beauty, balance, and harmony. So it kind of goes right in theme with our 10 of Wands, as we have discovered typically happens, right? So,
Yes.
the positive aspects of Libra, and again, there's always the polarities. So it's the relating, it's sharing, it's cooperative, it's social, agreeable, easygoing. Libra, the sign of Libra is the scales, right? It's the two scales finding balance. And so it's balanced, it's just, fair, charming. The negative aspects of Libra is dependent. Sometimes they can't act alone. They can tend to give their power away to others. They're indecisive, maybe passive, vain, imbalanced. And with the Libra energy, it's working on how do we balance the equal partnerships versus the power struggles? How do we develop compatibility and trust and have cooperation between equals? And I think this really relates to what I had mentioned before, which is really kind of what we're dealing with at large, which is how do we have these conversations? How do we be in connection with people who believe differently than us and still see them as a human, as a brother or sister, as, how do we manage our internal wounds and the collective wounds and stand for what we believe in while giving people space to be who they are, which might not be that appealing sometimes, or might be totally different than where we are. So, yeah. So then in evolutionary astrology, Libra represents the extremes. So we've talked about the scales. It's the polarity points. So it's these polarities, the extremes within each person's life. And so the lesson is, how do we learn balance? And balance is learned through gradually experiencing all sorts of extremes and learning how to center yourself through it. I'm going to say that one more time because I think that's a good, and I quote from the Evolutionary Astrology Glossary: balance is learned through gradually experiencing all sorts of extremes and learning how to center oneself. So the idea that we can go through these extremes, and that there's really strong lessons and there's really important parts of our personal soul's evolution to learning how to cultivate balance in the extremes. It makes me think a lot about Buddhist practices of being in the present and kind of laying there. And if the fly lands on your face, just letting the fly land on your face and being with the discomfort, and, or being in a hot room or a cold room and learning how to accept what is, and move through those kind of extremes when what you want is, you want it to be a nice 72 degrees, right? You want it to be 72 and sunny. And that's why I live in California. But so we want it to be like the perfect spring weather, but we know that we have to have the extremes in order to really create the lessons to cultivate a full life, right? Is there anything you wanted to add in there before I
just reminds me of like the philosophy, I think, behind cold showers and like people who blast themselves with freezing water every night. The idea behind that is that when you do that, it makes your body kill off all the cells that are functioning like below optimal levels. So it sends the kill signal to all those so that you can continuously have these like new and very efficient cells growing. And I think that's what the extremes, like when we go through periods of extremity, it kills off aspects of ourselves that are not working well, or brings them to our attention to where we're like, that's like, I got to do something about that. And that's like the gift of them. So yeah, with the whole, I'm so excited about fall this year and seeing all the dying leaves all over the place, because it's like, it's such a physical and beautiful symbol of this concept that like things die, like things die off, it's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. Like, look how beautiful all these red trees are.
That has been a total shift in my consciousness, that concept of being like, oh yes, another death. Wonderful. Like,
all those dead animals you saw the other day.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I finished, this is crazy. So I finished my second draft. I sent it off at like 11:45 p.m. on a Friday night. And then on Sunday morning, we went out as a family to go on a hike to the place we normally go to, which is like close by and where our kids like to go. And there was this massive fire that had happened. Like the whole place burned. It looked like a controlled burn because it wasn't like, I mean, there was things were burned, but it didn't look the way that, like, it wasn't just like everything was blasted. But it wasn't a controlled burn. We found out that it wasn't a controlled burn. And so then we went out, that was a couple weeks ago. So then we went out again, and, you know, it's interesting to see what happens 3 weeks after a burn, like the way that it looks. And anyway, we saw all these dead animals. It was so weird. I was like, oh gosh, is this like an omen? Is this a premonition? Because obviously I'm always looking into that stuff.
Yeah.
It was like a dead spider. It was we saw on the way home, we saw like 3 dead raccoons on the road. We saw a dead goose. I was just like, good grief. But it was odd because it was one of the first times where I was like, oh, this is great. Like there's some major concepts internally that are dying off, and we're at the time of year where things are dying off. And I've always thrived in the fall. Like I've always loved the fall. And so now there's all these layers of these metaphorical meanings that I'm starting to explore with being in harmony with nature. And it's just been so interesting to welcome the deaths and to think, you know, we're just learning how to die. Like we're all eventually going to die. Right. So we're learning how to transcend the sadness of it and look at it from its holistic place, which is there's always a rebirth. Like the minute something dies, you start the cycle of regeneration, and it's kind of exciting.
It is. Well, and that's the Libra. Like she's all about the natural law. Like she's the goddess of justice. Yeah, that's what she rules. Like the seasonal cycles.
Oh yes. Why don't you tell us about
cycles.
The mythology? Because you wrote that down.
That's basically all I had about that. But just that she is the mother. So Virgo is Estrella, right? She's like the goddess of purity. And so Themis, I don't know how to say her name, but she's the goddess of justice, who is Virgo's mother. And she's scales. Yeah. So she's all of the stuff that we're talking about with the cycles and on the natural evolution of things, like that is her. So
I love it. So Venus is co-ruled by Taurus and Libra, which we discussed earlier. And with Taurus, it's the inner relationship with self. And Venus in Libra correlates to the types of our outer relationships that we form with other people and why. So it's like our values, which are determinant to who we form relationships with and whom we don't. So this is the time to kind of look at how are we relating outside of ourselves? How are our relationships, and what is the motivation behind that? So in Libra, a lot of our learning, there was a little section where they were talking about the psychology of listening. And I was like, I had to laugh because I had just sent a message to some of my friends this morning about what a shitty listener I am. I'm like, I'm the worst. I'm 38 years old. I'm going to be 39 soon. And I still don't know how to listen. Like I'm the worst listener. I was in like a group with girlfriends last night. It was fine. We had a great time. And I was up last night worrying, like I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking, when are you going to learn how to just be like a generous listener? Like I just go straight into like this, my socially awkward knee-jerk response is to just start talking. And it was interesting to hear. So like in Libra, it's like we must objectively hear and listen to others from their reality so we don't project our reality and we can truly hear what is being said. Okay. So I was thinking last night, like, you know, so I'm like, okay, I can beat myself up over the fact that I was aware that I was like in hindsight that I was like, I could have been a better listener. It wasn't like I was offensive or just like, super obnoxious. I was just like sensitive to the fact that I was like, man, this is still something that I have to really work on. So I was thinking about, you know, going into conversations as an ungrounded person, which is, I think, where we typically start sometimes. Like we're, oh, hey, who are you? Know, you're in the grocery store. Oh, hi. Huh. What do I say to you? Right. Or you're at school or whatever it is. The lesson I kind of took away was like how important it is to be intentional in how we choose to listen. And I mean, it's hard to be that aware, right? Like in like every circumstance, to walk into a circumstance with friends or whoever and be like, okay, how am I going to show up here? How am I going to ground into this interaction? And this is a great exercise, especially if you're dealing with conflict. This was something that this woman, Jen Hatmaker, was talking about. She was like, conflict is not going to kill you. I thought that was a great thing.
Yeah.
She's like, you can have as many difficult conversations as you want and it's not going to kill you. I was like, that's a good point, because we love to, I mean, who wants to like parade straight into conflict, right? Like very few people love conflict, right? Nobody loves conflict. So I just was thinking like, it's important to think about how to be intentional in how we choose to listen, how we choose to show up in those social circumstances, and not to just go knee-jerk word vomit on a conversation, which is, what I can tend to do. What I end up doing, and what I was aware of, was I was like I wasn't like intentionally pushing an agenda. I was just going into my thought process, and I was thinking, I can choose to marginalize people. Like, it's this delicate balance of like, how do you actively share your positions? And then how do you share your positions and not marginalize someone who might believe differently than you, or who may not be where you're at in your faith journey, or who may not be where you're at. So I don't have the answers to these things, obviously, but.
No, I love that you bring that up though, because entering any kind of exchange with that attitude, like especially our like close relationships like parenting and marriage, and like,
oh yeah,
to show up with the attitude of what, like, I'm really going to listen, and what can I try to learn from this person without forcing my agenda onto them. That's a super hard, because everyone likes to feel like they're in control. Everyone thinks they're right,
Yes.
But yeah, how many, just relations could be smoothed if we could go in like that more often. I think that's a really great point.
I love that you said that, because this will segue us into our last little section here of our podcast. And I just want to quote, because it was talking about Libra, and because a lot of the Libra energy, it's balance, but it's also relationships with others. It's connections and building connections with others. That this was the subheading was de facto god or goddess. So it's kind of, how do we make the partner the de facto god or goddess? And we do this sometimes with our people. It's, we experience a taste of divinity through the partner. And I'm quoting here. We become confused and think that we're feeling that what we are feeling is coming from the partner, and not realizing it's actually coming from within us. Then we project onto the partner that they are the source of the good feelings we experience, when they are actually our own like mirror of our return to source yearnings. So no human can ever consistently live up to these projections. This is why we get really discouraged in relationships, when we're like, oh, I'm so in love, and then, oh, I'm rejected by him. Then like, it's all this other undercurrent, right? And so as the interactions proceed, we tend to start feeling let down by the partner's imperfections, and we tend to start criticizing the partner's faults, and we start to experience them in more of like where they're really at, which is always less than the potential we saw with them in the beginning, right? And so it's interesting to remember how wonderful we feel in those moments when we reach a momentary peak with that partner, and then figure out how do we not dive right into codependence, right?
Right.
So anyway, it's I just thought that was an interesting point in terms of how we weave being a good listener, maybe not pushing a full agenda, allowing your partner to show up how they're going to show up, So
yeah, that's like the Jungian psychology, like the person falls in love with their projection of the ideal, and then after a couple of years they see like, oh, that was just my own projection, but that's the thing that the person originally fell in love with. So like that's such an interesting concept and tendency. And I think that, yeah, to have a true partnership and to have real balance in a relationship is, like you said, like the really mindful listening, not trying to force our power over, because otherwise, yeah, you get when you have an unequal power dynamic, it ends up being just a not helpful relationship to either party. It's not this true point of intimacy and partnership.
Exactly. And I think that, I know for us, having been raised in Mormonism, that there's a belief system that if you're not equally yoked in your spirituality or your religious beliefs, that your marriage is going to be very challenging, or that you will not make it. right? And I think that's something that comes, those are woven into lots of different religious communities, right? That's not just where we came from. But that's the idea that I think I was thinking the other day, just yesterday, my husband, who's like an atheist, right? He's like a staunch atheist. Like you and I talk to you about my spirituality and my magic and all the stuff that I love, right? Like, nature and everything else and all of my spiritual realizations. And I mean, I can talk to him about it, but I'm not like, hey, let's do this together. And in the beginning, when our faith crisis was happening, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I really want to share this with him. I really want this to be something that we do together. And is this going to be okay? And eventually I've gotten to the place where I'm like, who am I to project my spiritual process onto him? Like, that is so awful. Like, to think that he's got to believe how I've got to believe. Like, that's just domination submission crap. That's just the same. Like, I'm trying to control him. I'm trying to control his experience on earth. Of course we can relate to each other and bond in other ways. And anyway, it was just interesting because I kind of just let it go. And I mean, he's used to me just being like, okay, this week you're wrapping your head in a turban and you're wearing white, like, or, next week it's a big, you just bought a bunch of crystals and what's going on here. Right. So I have to give him credit for, he just kind of lets me do my thing. So I have to kind of let him do his thing. And the other day we were just talking and he goes, I had this thought that it would be a lot more fun if I just let myself believe in a little bit more of the magic of life. And I was like, huh? Like, what? And I was loving it. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. So anyway, it just made me think, if I were coming at him being like, you need to believe this and you need to try this, like, he would have never said that. And who knows if he'll actually, that was like one thing out of his mouth. Like, I don't know if he's going to follow up with it, but I've learned at this point to just be like, whatever his process is his process. And
well, I mean, because the whole underlying truth of that entire thought system is like, yes, it does help in a relationship when your chorused values are aligned.
Yes.
Like that just makes sense.
That's logic. Right.
Right. But the way that you express those values in the world are going to look different from person to person. And so, yeah, to grow up thinking like, oh, a spirituality has to look this very specific way. And if you're not doing it that way, then you're not doing it right. And it's not going to be a valid connection point for us. Right.
Right.
But yeah, it is like the deepest core value is what matters.
Well, and what's behind it too is it's just controlling families and controlling a narrative. Like it's like that belief is just trying to root a narrative that may or may not be what is meant for you in this lifetime. Maybe it is, like, maybe that will work for you. And so it's like figuring out how, and I see this a lot as this like Libra ethos, because it's relationships with other people and it's learning like, how do you maintain that straight balance when there's all these polarities going on around you and other people are believing differently than you, and how do you hold the space for them to believe what they believe and you believe what you believe and still be harmonious and creating that system. And I think we as a society are the live experiment of that right now. We're watching it unfold in real time in front of us. And so I don't know the answer, obviously, but I definitely am encouraged when I keep seeing people showing up and people are wanting to do their work and they're waking up. And I keep seeing more and more people really turning inward and going, what do I believe and how do we foster more connection? So I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged with all the crap going on in the world, which there is a lot. And I'm not trying to deny that there aren't people who are really suffering. I'd like to focus and just remind that in my experience, and I find that I have a pretty diverse group of people who I'm interacting with, that people are optimistic and they're trying to show up. So I think we leave people with that. What do you think, Ames?
I think so. Yes.
All right. So if you are interested in following along with us, we send out a newsletter once a month. We would love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram. Yes. We are very responsive in our DMs. And yes, is there anything else?
No, just enjoy your fall, enjoy your week.
Yes. And if you feel so inclined, please share our podcast with whoever you think might benefit from whatever it is that we're talking about. We would so appreciate it if you got something out of this, to let your friends know, if you feel pulled to do that.
Yes. Yeah. And we always, we love to hear feedback about what parts are you really enjoying? What parts are you not enjoying so much? Like if you felt a connection to something we've said, we love hearing about that. That makes us, you know, gives us some breadcrumbs as we move forward, as far as what you guys want to hear more of. So,
all right. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful week.
Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.